All right. Well, Eric, thank you so much for joining me today. It's not very often you get to speak with the construction genius, but I feel lucky that I'm able to do that. So thank you for joining me today. Just kind of wanted to kind of kick things off. And what inspired the construction genius, platform? How'd that kind of get going for you?
Yeah, let me talk about the name real quick because people often ask me, "Well, Eric, does that make you the genius?" Because in construction, if it's a game of ego in many ways, but then people spot like a fake ego a mile away, and I tell them that it comes from the quote from Thomas Edison that genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. So my clients, they give the 99%. I'm here just for the 1% of inspiration.
All right, perfect. I love that. Well, you've got quite a list of folks that I see on your LinkedIn, and I'm sure there's more. That's probably just kind of the highlighted list of folks that you've helped throughout your kind of coaching. Um, what do you think in this age? I always call it the age of AI.
Yep.
I think it brings a lot of complexity. One thing's for sure, construction companies don't like a lot of change. And when they face it, especially when it comes to like technology changes, um, do you think that's the biggest thing? And one of the biggest things that's facing leadership today is like, do we change? Do we have to adapt here? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it is absolutely. And I don't think it's a question of do we change? I think it's a question of how will we change? Um, I just actually had a fascinating interview myself with a gentleman who's deep into AI from my own podcast, and the one thing that he talked about is the deflation of knowledge, and what that means is that knowledge is becoming so much more accessible to people that the value of knowledge, the amount of knowledge is increasing, the value of having that knowledge is decreasing. So, for example, with the introduction of AI, the ability of someone to produce an accurate estimate quickly is going to increase exponentially. And so therefore the particular skills that someone has in putting an estimate together is going to become devalued.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to go across project management. It's going to go across a variety of other knowledge based activities that are related to construction. So, therefore, someone who is a generalist who has great taste and has the great ability to build relationships with people and has an ability to see where the business is going, they're going to become tremendously valuable. And someone who's a specialist in these particular areas that we've valued for so long is going to become less valuable. And you've got to be able to see that and adapt to that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that leaders are going to be looking for more folks that are that kind of, I guess, they're going to be looking for folks that are more like that. They're looking at their bigger picture type folks to kind of fill these areas now.
I think they're going to look for people who obviously understand how to use the tools, and the tools are going to be tremendously easy to use as things go forward. But they're going to look for people who are able to take the information, and when you reach the point where you have a choice between two things, that the machines are not going to make that choice for you, but then you have to be able to make the choice. That's what I mean by taste. They need the discernment there, the insight, the understanding to be able to make the right choice at the point where the machines are going to stop.
Right. I would say a bit more autonomous as to trying to make that make the decision. Some people have a very difficult time of making a decision. They can make list upon list of things that they need to look for, um, but yet you can't make a decision on it. And I think that separates some folks from being in a leadership position, and some folks for not.
Well, I think one of the reasons why is because some people don't like to take responsibility. So that's one thing that you're looking for in the people that you hire and the people that you promote into leadership roles is someone who's willing to say the buck does stop with me. In my role and
Hmm.
responsibility, I'm willing to raise my hand. If a mistake has been made, I'm not going to pass the buck or point fingers or blame other people, but I am going to take responsibility for what I've been given to do.
In your experience, do you find that, is, from when your interviews with folks, are those folks easier to find these days, or is that getting less and less of a trait, where those are kind of more of the needle in the haystack type people?
I think people like that are always needle in a haystack. Um,
Yeah.
I think that there's a ton of people who are paycheck picker uppers.
Yeah.
You want to weed those people out of your business as much as possible. I know in construction, finding talent is often a challenge, but if you as the leader of your company are committed to high performance and to excellence and to continuous improvement, then that will trickle down throughout your organization. And I think one of the challenges that a lot of construction companies have, particularly at the moment, is that things have been pretty good for quite a while. And so, the bank balance may be good, and because there's cash in the bank, and because a loss here or a loss there is not going to devastate your business, you can tend to slack off a little bit. And that's exactly when, if you allow that to happen, your business is going to decline. And you really need to be diligent to be holding yourself accountable for your performance, and then making sure that you're holding the people in your organization responsible for their performance.
So tell me a little bit um, about kind of your background and how it's kind of influenced your approach. Like,
Um,
where'd you get started?
Yeah, so I have a degree in history, and so I do not have a technical background in construction at all. I've never worked in a construction company or for a construction company. My background is in sales, but in 2004, I got into selling a leadership development program, and my first client was a contractor. And so I got to know a lot of contractors through selling that program, and I got to know a lot about leadership just in various experiences in my life. And when I started my own business in 2013, I niched pretty quickly to construction, focusing on executive coaching and leadership development and strategic planning. And the reason I focused on construction is because I just love contractors. I love the idea of someone being able to drive down the street and point to a project and say, I built that. I think it's tremendously profound, not only building a company that provides for people who work for you and services your customer, but also impacts the communities that you work in and live in. And so I just love construction.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's very, very rare, because I find a lot of folks, they come from construction, and I feel like, I come from construction, and I know that I can be very, very jaded sometimes in my opinions,
Yeah.
and I think it's kind of a fresh perspective that you give, when you give it. Like I said, I like your post and the things that you talk about, because it does make sense. Sometimes that conflict resolution, kind of, coming to the table with, hey, here's the receipts. Let's not talk about the problem. Let's talk about the solution, and then kind of breaking it down of how you get there. I think is very, very important. So,
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've been reflecting on this a lot lately. I had a post this week that may be slightly controversial because, a lot of times people say, don't make the problem about the people, make it about the issue or the problem. And lately, I've really been thinking about we actually need to do more work on making it about the people, because people are the source of our problems. And what I mean by that is this, is that I've found a lot of progress begins in life when two people are willing to be respectfully direct with each other. And what I mean by that is when we hedge what we say, or when we speak in euphemisms, we do a disservice to the person that we're speaking about and to the team that's involved in that particular issue. But when we're respectful, when we're direct, when we call out an issue and attach a person to that issue, then what can happen is you can begin to make progress on solving that issue. But I found personally that without naming a person that is directly associated with the issue, that progress can often not happen.
yeah, and I agree with you. I did find, because I think I remember reading that post, but I've thought about it a bit in, just circumstances where I was in a leadership position on a construction, and everybody likes what we call the attaboy, right?
Yes.
But nobody wants the focus of poor performance, right? And so I've always found there's a lot of finger pointing. Now, not necessarily my fault. I've often heard, well, that's above my pay grade. I wasn't, they told me to do this and that's what I did, those types of things. Even though it didn't really solve the problem where you were. And I think it was more of you were expecting someone to act autonomously, I guess, make a good decision. But it didn't come out quite that way. And then I always go back to the old adage, well, folks what is it? Oh goodness, I just lost it there for a second. They expect what you inspect, I guess.
Yeah, or you must inspect what you expect.
Yeah. That kind of the other way around.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think one of the reasons why leaders struggle with this is because they're in the position they're in because they do take onto themselves a lot of responsibility. And so they assume that once they've communicated, the person who they've communicated to will behave exactly like they would had they received the task or the communication. And that's often not the case. And that's why once you have delegated, you must then be willing to hold people accountable and to do so at an appropriate cadence. And in my mind, it's better to start off a little more intense in your cadence of accountability and then back off once you see someone's capability, as opposed to assuming they're going to get it done and then find out later on that they haven't done it in the way that you want them to do it.
Yeah. And I've run into that a bunch. Even when I ran my own shop. And it's tough. It's a tough transition. And I think this is one of the biggest things that happens in construction is the transition between being a technician, right? Mm-hmm. And then trying to take that technician and then turn them into a leader. That step from being, I took the step from being, a carpenter, and then I went to lead carpenter, and I had, 9 guys under me, and they were framing, doing these different things. It's a different step, and it's one that I wasn't quite prepared for because I wasn't dealing with the problems of building anymore. I was dealing with the problems of personnel. And it's a huge step for some people. It was a big step for me, and it took me a while to, get my footing.
Yeah, I think it's universal, and you described it so well because you move from building a project to having to build a team of people.
Yeah.
And obviously the problems on a project, you can probably describe them as black and white in many ways. There's a problem, I can think of a solution, I have experience solving this particular problem. Whereas when you deal with people, you shift into a lot of gray areas. And in fact, I was interviewing the CEO of a large construction company many years ago, and he described it as the shift from building projects to building teams of people. And I actually took that and built a whole leadership course around that idea of how to build a project, but when you come into a leadership role, you have to shift from project building to people building and team building. And like you said, that is tremendously difficult.
Yeah, because your expectations get thrown out of whack, so to speak.
Yep.
Because you do, as a technician, you approach a problem as it's black and white. I know how I'm going to do this. This is how I fix this. This is how I make this happen. Right. It's very step by step, somewhat rote at a point. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very, very difficult step without some sort of training for somebody to step into that next level. And I never had any training. And I don't know how many construction companies do that now. They see potential in somebody, and then they say, hey, you're great at what you do. And you're fantastic. Obviously, you need to move up through the ranks. How would you like to become, a foreman? Or how would, what that foreman then stepping into maybe a superintendent's role or something like that, or superintendent, or even worse, some kid coming out of college.
You're right.
And never has led a group of these salty guys, of people, and I will say they're salty because they just are. It's a different, mindset. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, by the way, you're in a leadership role here. You got 20 guys, 30 guys, that you've got to, make sure they get their stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what's another thing that I've found that is challenging for a lot of people, and it actually leads to micromanagement, is that some people they're so used to being able to go to a job site and start from point A and finish at point B and see what they've gotten done throughout the day, and they derive so much pleasure and fulfillment from that, that when they begin to step into a leadership role where they're no longer doing that building, they begin to feel guilty, thinking that they're not actually working when they're spending time coordinating and communicating and all those kinds of things.
Yes. Yes. I think that may be the biggest misstep that you can make as a young leader, feeling like you need to go put your tool belt on and go help at certain places. Because you do. I've been there, felt guilty when I left a crew on a job site, and because I had to go someplace else to another job site to go look at something else, but I left a crew over there, said, okay, I need you guys to get this done. And but I was looking at the site going, these guys aren't going to get this done. It was, you know what I mean? If I'm not there, that it's that pulling feeling, like if I'm not there, this is not going to pull through. But you have to put that responsibility on those folks, which goes back to kind of our original point. If it doesn't get done, then as a leader, how do you approach these folks and go, hey, we were supposed to get this, this, and this done.
Yep.
Can you tell me why? And who's responsible for this, this, and this? Because I agree with you. At some point, the buck has to stop somewhere. The whole idea of shuffling these ideas around to say, well, this guy over here, it's his problem. And then this guy says, oh, no, it's his problem. And nobody steps up and says, it's mine.
Yeah, it's interesting because you described it well there, the accountability loop. It's a simple one. It can be painful, either because of your discomfort with holding someone accountable or the other person's resistance to it. But it's simply three questions. Did you do it? If not, why not? And how can I help?
Yeah.
And so I need to try and suck out as much emotion as possible from the accountability conversation. I'm going to assume that we're here to figure out what the problem is and to solve the problem. But I'm definitely going to have that conversation. And I always like to coach the folks that I work with that the quicker you have the conversation, the better, because the more time passes, the more pain is going to increase and the more cost that is you're going to incur. And so the more comfortable you are at having those accountable conversations, the more consistent you are, the much more effective you are, and the more profitable your jobs are going to be.
Yeah. And I've always found that the faster I approach it, the less grudge somebody holds.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't know, I guess from being on both sides of I'll say the construction coin.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had folks that say, I think things are turning around because there was, for me, when I was coming up through the trades, there was always there's an office, kind of group, and then there's the trades or the labor kind of group, right? And there was a bit of a friction. There's a bit of a tension.
Yes.
But I was just had a conversation just the other day. He was like, well, I don't think that friction's not there. Most of the people we have are, they're willing to get it done. They're willing, if it is, it's very, very rare. And so that was kind of one point of view, but I don't know. I don't know how that goes away because of just the toughness that's there a lot of times, and the kind of unwillingness to, give up ground a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, so I think there's a couple of things you can do here with the silos, because they do exist. The first thing I would do is make sure that I'm educating people in the office, and particularly people on, like the accounts payable, accounts receivable, human resources side. I want to educate them where we actually make money. Okay. So if I don't have guys and gals in the field putting work in place, then you don't have a paycheck. So let me just be crystal clear about that. Now, Having educated them, I then have to help them to understand, particularly again, if they're in the HR and accounting roles, they're there to support the field. Now, when it comes to the project and the field side, you have the guys in the office, the project managers, project engineers, and they do get into conflicts with people in the field, the office and field conflict. So what I encourage my clients to do is to focus on the relationships between the leaders of the office and the leaders of the field. So depending on the size of your construction company, you might have a general superintendent who has superintendents and foremen reporting to him. And then you might have a COO or you might have an area manager or a project executive. They're peers. Okay. Now, if their relationship sucks because of ego or because of communication breakdowns or whatever, I promise you the supers and the PMs aren't going to get on, the foremen and the PEs aren't going to get on, and there's going to be all of this conflict. So you must work on that relationship, because if they're strong in their relationship, then it makes it much easier to cascade that strength down through the rest of the company and bridge the gaps between the field and the office.
Yeah. So what do you think about, training these things? A lot of times I hear this. I do not think that there is enough training, not only on leadership and making those transitions, but even on some type, some skills levels. There's just not enough training internally. Get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think training is something that is tremendously important. I think the structure of the training is where you have to focus, and also with your expectations. So I think when it comes to technical training, you can have higher expectations for, let's say I bring my guys out of the field and we go into and work on a particular process. I can have an expectation that if we train on that, then the next time they go and do that process, they're going to improve on it. But I should always temper my expectations, particularly when it comes to more of the soft skills, because a lot of times when someone like me who does leadership development comes into a construction company, they sell it like a magic pill. And they do that because that's the way to make sales, right? Here, take the magic pill and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work like that. So what I would encourage people to do when it comes to the soft skills particularly is to be incremental in your approach and targeted and bite-sized in your approach. So for instance, let's say for 1 quarter, I'm going to bring in my project managers and I'm going to teach them for 90 minutes how to manage their time effectively. And that's all I'm going to do for a quarter. And I'm going to make the theme of the next 90 days managing your time effectively. And I'm going to give them only 90 minutes of training, not a half day or a day, because I just want to give them the very basics that they'll be able to use and apply in such a way that it'll have an impact on them. I'm not going to overload them. I'm going to keep it straightforward. I'm going to keep it applicable to what they're actually doing. And then I'm going to build incrementally over time.
Right. And then there's got to be an evaluation step within that as well, because I agree with you. You've got to there's a short amount of time. I mean, nobody really has an attention span over 15 minutes these days anyway. So it's kind of tough. But that building, I think, is an important step, what you're talking about, that you get your 15 minutes or you get your 90 minutes in here, and then you come back that next quarter and you go, okay, we got another 90 minutes, but let's evaluate how the last lesson, went. There's got to be some, and I hate this. I hate the word KPI or the acronym KPI. It just seems so corporate. Sure. But there's some sort of measure of, hey, how well did you use it? Did it help?
Yes.
And then why did it or did it not? What are some improvements maybe that you could make, or what improvements could I make? As if you think I'm wrong here, because I have run into that situation where you've got some folks that like I would show the software and we'd have a 90-minute session, and then they would ask specific questions, and I had some very, very sharp people asking me questions about software and doing those types of things, and then they go, well, what about doing it this way? And I didn't think about it that way, So again, kind of that open dialogue. I just your thoughts on that whole thing, because I believe that's building again, I guess.
So that dialogue is really effective, because if you come with a training program, and then you can immediately get feedback from the people in the field or in the office who are actually supposed to use the program, it can help strip away some of the I would say the lack of precision that is often in a generic training program. And that's one of the things you want to do, is if you can customize it to your particular situation through getting that feedback from the people who are using the training, it can make it much more effective.
Right. Very good. So I guess, what have you noticed in your, time of leadership training? Have you noticed any like approaches or changes, that the most like significant changes in leadership style in construction, kind of over your time?
I think that the biggest one is the shift from what I call the commander to the coach. And so, if we step back in time 30 years ago, a top-down command style of leadership was accepted by most people. I think it's kind of my personal opinion, it's kind of a relic of, we fought, a couple of world wars in the first half of the last century. People coming into the construction industry had a military mindset that kind of pervaded and stuck around for a few decades. We haven't fought a major war in many years. And so as a result of that, most people are unfamiliar with a command and control type leadership style. But they are familiar because of, America's obsession with sports. They are familiar with a coaching style. And often many of your top performers in your construction companies have an athletic background. They've been involved in competitive sports. And so what I've seen is that major shift there from the command and control to the coaching type of leadership style. That doesn't mean you don't, call people out on their stuff or, make calls. It's not a soft style necessarily, but it's very much a more by your side style as opposed to coming from on high.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I like that. I'll be going to a networking event next Tuesday with the group that I worked with about, and it was all about that, much of that same thought, the that coaching kind of style, that you're not barking orders, but you're giving instruction, you're taking the feedback in, and then you're adjusting that instruction to get them where they need to go.
Yeah, and I think one of the things you've got to get good at then is coaching conversations. And
what do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so when you're meeting with someone and you're wanting to improve their performance, you can tell them what to do, and that's fine. But particularly if someone's been in the business for a while, most people already understand what they need to do. They just need help articulating it and clarifying it, and maybe talking through some of the challenges that they have with actually doing what they're supposed to do. And so if you're able to frame a coaching conversation effectively, then that can be very helpful. And that involves a couple of things. One is kind of obvious that we all know, and that is asking open-ended questions. So who, what, where, why, when questions, as opposed to yes, no questions. And then the other thing that I found very helpful is what I call asking the natural question. And what I mean by that is you're talking to someone and you're perhaps talking about an issue, and a question pops into your head as a result of what they've said, maybe as a result of their body language. You know how someone says something, but the way they say it gives you some information that's kind of interesting. And a question pops into your head, and then you begin to debate in your head whether or not you should ask that question. And maybe it's because it's an uncomfortable question, or maybe you think if they don't know the answer, they'll feel uncomfortable. But it's that natural question, the question that should be asked. And good coaches are very good at asking that question. And so that's one thing I would encourage leaders to get good at, is make sure that you're asking that natural question as often as possible.
Great. So how do people get a hold of you to kind of do this? Is all through your website or through your LinkedIn? Is that kind of the approach?
Yeah. My website is constructiongenius.com. And so you can go there, and there's, the contact page, but one thing I like about my website is there's a ton of free resources on there that you can get. There's also a ton of letters from clients of mine who've worked with me. And you'll be able to read those letters and kind of get a sense of my style, because I'm not a fit for everyone. And that's really important to understand. And in my line of work, I know I'm not a fit for everyone. And so if you're interested in learning more about what I do, I encourage you to go to the website and walk through that. You can also check out links to my course, my podcast, and my book. So there's a bunch of different resources through constructiongenius.com that'll give you some more insight into who I am and what I do.
All right, very good. Well, I'll definitely put those links in the description on this, quick conversation that we had. But I appreciate your time today. I really do. I just kind of a short format. I just wanted to get to know you a little bit better, know more about what you do. I think it's important what you do because, like I said, I think we touched on it. There are so many, whether they're young or old, trying to make that transition. There's so many folks trying to make that transition, whether you're out in the field trying to make the transition into a foreman role, I think, or whether you're coming out of college trying to make a position in a PM role, or if you're in a PM role, you might be struggling a little bit trying to figure out, why, things aren't kind of working out. It's, this type of thing is invaluable to folks. And so I appreciate your time and sharing it with us today. And I hope I'll share this with my folks as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate you having me on.